A black mother, buried under medical bills and trapped in a job that treated her like she was disposable, stumbled across something that could have changed her life in an instant, a wallet packed with $5,000. To her, that kind of money wasn't just cash. It was rent paid on time. It was medicine for her sick son. It was relief from the weight she carried every single day. But instead of keeping it, she chose honesty. She chose to return it. And for that choice, she was humiliated, branded a thief, and thrown out of her job like trash. Her whole world collapsed in front of strangers. But that wasn't the end. Because just hours later, the quiet, older man who had misplaced that wallet walked back into the diner. And he wasn't just any customer. He was Arthur Pendleton, the reclusive billionaire who owned the entire restaurant chain. And he wanted to know why his wallet had ended up in the hands of a woman everyone was calling a criminal. The smell of burnt coffee and greasy bacon clung to the clothes and hair of Jasmine Carter, a waitress who had been holding the diner together for years without anyone ever truly seeing her. At 6:02 a.m., the lights buzzed to life in the Golden Spoon Diner, washing the red vinyl booths and checkered floor in a tired yellow glow. To Jasmine, it was another endless Tuesday, another 14-hour day on her aching feet, juggling coffee pots and impatient customers, all for a wage that couldn't even cover rent. But the real weight wasn't the work, it was her son, Marcus. 7 years old, bright-eyed, and funny enough to make anyone laugh, but constantly fighting for breath. Severe asthma had turned every month into a battle against medical bills. Inhalers, treatments, emergency visits, it was money Jasmine simply didn't have. And taped to her fridge, under a magnet, was the eviction notice she tried not to look at. Carter, table 7's already complaining the coffee's cold. Try to keep up today, all right? The harsh voice of Dennis Peterson, the manager, snapped her out of her thoughts. Peterson wasn't a leader, he was a bully hiding behind the company handbook, a man who used rules like weapons against anyone below him. Yes, Mr. Peterson, Jasmine said flatly, forcing herself into motion with a fresh pot of coffee. Smile, take the order, repeat. That's what her life had become. The breakfast rush blurred past. Scrambled eggs, extra crispy bacon, toast no butter. Jasmine moved like a machine, but inside her head the numbers spun, rent overdue, Marcus's medication $187, shoes he desperately needed. The math never worked. Her only breath of relief in that place was Brenda, a seasoned waitress with sharp humor and a heart as soft as gold. During a quick lull, Brenda leaned against the counter. He's in one of his moods today, she muttered, nodding toward Peterson's office. Corporate sent him some email about cutting costs, so now he's counting napkins like they're gold bars. Jasmine tried to smile. Tell me something I don't know. You look worn out, honey. Marcus okay? Brenda asked gently. Same as always, Jasmine admitted. Rough night. The humidifier helps, but, she trailed off. Brenda didn't need the rest. She knew what it meant to be a parent with more fear than answers. It was late morning, about 11:30, when everything changed. A quiet older man had sat in booth 12, ordered only oatmeal and black coffee, and left a generous tip before slipping out. Jasmine barely noticed him, just another polite customer in a sea of faces. But when she cleared his booth, her hand brushed something wedged between the cushion and wall. A wallet. Not flashy, just worn brown leather. But heavy. Too heavy. She turned it over in her hands. Company policy drilled into her by Peterson was strict, all lost items must be immediately logged with management, no excuses. Jasmine glanced at Peterson's office. He was on the phone, red-faced, waving his arms like he was fighting with a supplier over ketchup packets. She sighed. If she walked in now, it would mean paperwork, lectures, and Peterson's smug condescension. Better to wait until he was free. She slipped the wallet into the deep pocket of her apron. 5 minutes, she told herself. 10 at most. She would put it on his desk, no problem. But that single choice, to hold it just a little longer, was about to turn her entire life upside down. She thought she was doing the right thing. Instead, it would cost her everything. Through more lunch orders and coffee refills, the weight of the wallet pressed against her leg like it was trying to remind her of its presence. Finally, she ducked into the break room for a breather. Her heart hammered. She hadn't stolen anything, she was only waiting for Peterson. But curiosity gnawed at her. Maybe there was ID inside. If she could call the owner directly, she could avoid Peterson's nonsense altogether. Hands trembling, she opened the wallet. Cash. Stacks of it. Her breath hitched, hundreds upon hundreds neatly folded. She counted quickly in her head. $5,000, maybe more. $5,000. Rent. Medical bills. Food. A break from drowning. For a brief, dizzying moment, she imagined taking it. No one would know. The man was old. Maybe he wouldn't even remember how much he had. She pictured Marcus coughing in the night, his small chest straining for air. Couldn't this money save him? But then her eyes caught on something else. A photo. Faded, edges soft with time. A younger version of the man with a smiling woman by his side. The back read, Arthur and Genevieve, 1978. Our bench. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just money. This was someone's life, someone's memory. She couldn't take it. The decision was clear now. She found his name, Arthur Pendleton. She slid the photo back, closed the wallet, and breathed. She was ready to give it back. But the moment she stepped out of the break room, Peterson was waiting, with eyes sharp and hungry. She was about to be accused of the very thing she resisted with all her heart. Jasmine's steps slowed as Peterson's cold voice cut through the hum of the diner. Carter. My office. Now. The way he said it made her stomach churn. Every customer's head seemed to turn, eyes tracking her as if she was already guilty of something. Brenda froze by the coffee machine, her face tightening with worry. Jasmine's heart thudded. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just about to hand him the wallet. But from the look in Peterson's eyes, this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. The short walk to his office felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. Peterson's cramped office was as lifeless as the man himself, a cheap desk covered in clutter, a faded Manager of the Month certificate from years ago, and a small black and white security monitor in the corner showing 4 grainy camera feeds. Peterson didn't ask her to sit. He leaned behind the desk, clicked the mouse, and jabbed a finger at the screen. I saw you, Carter. Jasmine frowned. Saw me? Sir, what are you? Don't play dumb, Peterson sneered. He rewound the tape to 11:34 a.m. There she was, clearing booth 12. There she was, sliding the wallet into her apron pocket. He fast-forwarded, 11:40, 11:45. The camera showed her serving tables, smiling at a child, refilling drinks, all with the wallet still tucked away. 22 minutes, Peterson said, his voice dripping with triumph. You had it on you for 22 minutes. That's not following procedure. That's theft. Jasmine's chest tightened. No, I was waiting for you to get off the phone. I was about to give it to you. I even checked inside for ID to return it directly to the customer. She placed the wallet on the desk, untouched. But Peterson didn't even glance at it. His eyes were locked on her, hungry for power. You expect me to believe that? He scoffed. Please. I know your type. Always asking for more hours. Always behind on rent. Desperate. You saw the cash and thought you'd hit the jackpot. The only reason you didn't run out the door with it is because you knew you wouldn't get past me. The words cut like knives. He wasn't just accusing her, he was tearing apart her dignity, reducing her to nothing but her struggles. That's not true, Jasmine's voice cracked. I saw a photo inside, a man and his wife. That's why I stopped. His name's Arthur Pendleton. I wanted to return it to him. Peterson laughed. Convenient story. You're done here. Zero tolerance. You're fired effective immediately. She chose honesty. He chose to destroy her for it. Jasmine's knees nearly gave out. Please, Mr. Peterson. My son's sick. I need this job. That's not my problem, he said coldly. Pack your things and get out. 5 minutes. Humiliation poured over her in waves. He wasn't just firing her, he was branding her in front of the entire diner. As she stepped out of his office, Peterson followed like a guard, making sure she didn't pocket the silverware. She tried to steal a wallet, he boomed loudly enough for customers to hear. This is what happens when you think you're above the rules. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Jasmine felt dozens of eyes burn into her skin. Brenda's mouth dropped open, her face a mask of disbelief. Jasmine grabbed her worn purse and thin jacket from the locker, her hands shaking. She couldn't even look at Brenda. Shame clung to her like grease. Then, without another word, she pushed through the glass doors into the blinding afternoon sun. The bell above the door chimed like a cruel farewell. The noise of traffic swallowed her as she walked away. She had gone in that morning worried about bills. Now she was jobless, branded a thief, and stripped of the only income keeping her and Marcus afloat. Her mind screamed one thought over and over: what am I going to tell my son? Losing her job was devastating. But what came next would test her in ways she couldn't imagine. The walk home blurred past, cars honking, people laughing on their lunch breaks, food trucks sending up savory smells. But Jasmine moved in a fog, numb. Her building loomed ahead, a tired 3-story with peeling paint and rattling windows. She climbed the stairs, her legs heavy as lead. Inside her apartment, silence hit her. No cartoons. No humming. Just a note on the table in Mrs. Gable's careful handwriting. Marcus had a coughing spell. I took him over to my place and put him on the nebulizer. He's calm now. Don't worry. Jasmine pressed the note to her chest. Relief mixed with guilt. She sank onto the sagging sofa, her eyes drifting to the eviction notice on the fridge. The bold red letters mocked her. The walls seemed to close in. Hours later, she picked Marcus up from Mrs. Gable's. He ran into her arms, bubbling with excitement about a movie he'd watched. Jasmine held him tight, hiding her tears in his hair. Back home, she forced herself to smile through dinner, nod through his chatter about superheroes. But Marcus saw through her. "Mommy, are you sad?" he asked quietly. Jasmine swallowed hard. Yeah, baby. A little. Because of work? She nodded. I won't be at the diner anymore. He frowned. But you like making pancakes. It's complicated, she whispered. She couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that she had been humiliated and cast out for doing the right thing. Later that night, after Marcus fell asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with her old laptop. Job listings filled the screen. Overnight cleaner. Warehouse worker. Telemarketer. All impossible for a single mother with a sick child. She rubbed her temples, staring at the bills piled around her. Her thoughts drifted back to the wallet. $5,000. If she had been the person Peterson accused her of being, she wouldn't be here drowning. For the first time, she almost wished she had taken it. She buried her face in her arms and cried silently, the sound swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator. What Jasmine didn't know was that her life was about to collide with the truth, and with the man who held the power to change everything. Arthur Pendleton didn't care much about the money in his wallet. $5,000 was less than what his fortune earned in interest before sunrise. But tucked inside that leather fold was something priceless, a faded photograph of his late wife, Genevieve. He carried it every single day for nearly half a century. It was his anchor, his memory, his reason for building the empire that bore both their names. So when his hand brushed against an empty pocket at a small bookstore later that afternoon, his calm cracked. His wallet was gone. He retraced his steps in his mind, the park, the bookstore, and the Golden Spoon diner where he had eaten a simple breakfast earlier. He hadn't visited one of his own restaurants in years. That morning, nostalgia had pulled him there, a quiet urge to see if the warmth and humanity that had built his first diner still lived on. Instead, he now felt a hollow ache in his chest. By 4 p.m., his black sedan rolled back up to the Golden Spoon. Arthur stepped out, leaning slightly on his cane, his eyes narrowing at the weathered sign missing a letter. It read, the G_L Den Spoon. The building looked tired, stripped of the soul he and Genevieve once poured into their first diner decades ago. Inside, a young waitress with pink hair barely looked up from her phone. Behind the counter, Dennis Peterson puffed himself up, barking orders about sugar dispensers. Arthur walked slowly to him. "Excuse me," Arthur said quietly. "I was here earlier. Around 11. I think I left my wallet." Peterson straightened immediately, sensing opportunity. "A lost wallet? Could you describe it?" "Dark leather. Old. There was a significant amount of cash," Arthur replied. Peterson's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction. "Ah yes. The wallet. Booth 12. We secured it." Arthur exhaled with relief. "Thank God. The money doesn't matter. But there's a photograph." "Rest assured, sir," Peterson cut him off with false pride. "It's safe. Though you should know, you were nearly the victim of theft. But I personally handled it." Arthur's brows furrowed. "Theft?" "One of my waitresses," Peterson said, lowering his voice dramatically. "A woman named Jasmine Carter. She found your wallet and concealed it in her apron. Took it into the break room. Caught her red-handed on camera. Fired her on the spot. Zero tolerance, that's how we run things here." He leaned back, clearly expecting praise. Maybe even a tip. But Arthur's silence unsettled him. Arthur had built a global empire on reading people. He knew when someone was performing for him. And Peterson's eagerness to play hero didn't sit right. His story reeked of ambition, not truth. This waitress, Arthur said slowly, his voice sharpening. You're certain she was trying to steal? Absolutely, Peterson replied with a confident nod. Kept it on her person for over 20 minutes. Clear intent. Arthur's jaw tightened. I want to see the footage. Peterson froze. The footage? Sir, there's no need. I already handled. Arthur's tone dropped, steel cutting through each word. Show me the footage. Now. Arthur wasn't about to take Peterson's word. He needed to see for himself who was lying, and who was telling the truth. In the cramped office, Peterson fumbled nervously with the mouse. The grainy black and white video began to play. Together they watched Jasmine clear booth 12, discover the wallet, hesitate, and then slip it into her apron. See? Peterson said quickly. Concealment. Arthur's eyes didn't move. They stayed locked on the screen. They watched Jasmine serve tables, smiling gently at a child, speaking patiently to an elderly couple. She looked tired, yes, but not like a thief. She looked like a woman working through exhaustion. Then she entered the break room, the one blind spot in the diner. Peterson jumped in. This is where she counted the cash. Classic move. Arthur ignored him. On screen, Jasmine re-emerged a minute later, her face set with determination. She walked directly toward Peterson's office. Before she could even open her mouth, Peterson was seen jabbing his finger, ordering her inside. Then came the humiliating dismissal, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. The footage ended. Silence filled the room, broken only by the computer's low hum. Arthur turned his gaze on Peterson. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of thunder. It is not as you described. Peterson stammered, with all due respect, the facts. The facts, Arthur cut in sharply, are that your employee found a lost item. You were on the phone. She served customers with that wallet still in her apron, never touching the money. The facts are she spent less than 2 minutes in private, and I know exactly what she looked at in there, because the photo of my wife was untouched. If she were a thief, that photo would be gone. Arthur's voice dropped lower, deadly calm. The facts are that she tried to bring it to you, and you silenced her. Then you humiliated her. Not because she was guilty, but because you wanted to look like a hero. Peterson's face drained of color. I was following policy. You were feeding your ego, Arthur snapped. You crushed an honest woman just to score points with corporate. You didn't protect my property. You destroyed her dignity. The man Peterson thought was just another customer was about to end his career. Arthur straightened, his presence filling the small room. I started this company with my wife. We built it on respect and humanity, not rules used as weapons. And now I see the kind of man running my diners. My name is Arthur Pendleton. And as of this moment, you no longer work for Starlight Hospitality Group. The word struck like a hammer. Peterson's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His world collapsed in an instant. Arthur turned his back on him, picked up the phone, and calmly instructed the waitress at the counter to pull Jasmine Carter's file. He wanted her address. Because this wasn't over. Not for Jasmine. The man who owned everything was on his way to the woman who had lost it all. And their lives were about to collide in a way neither could have predicted. Jasmine sat at her wobbly kitchen table, surrounded by piles of bills. The eviction notice sat in the middle like a gravestone. Each envelope she opened carried more bad news, late fees, collection threats, final warnings. Her eyes were dry now. She'd cried all she could. The only sound in the apartment was the hum of the old refrigerator and Marcus's soft breathing from the bedroom. She pressed her palms against her face. How had it come to this? She had done everything right, worked hard, been honest, raised her son to be kind. And yet, her reward for integrity was public shame and unemployment. Then came the knock. It wasn't the timid knock of her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable. It wasn't the impatient pounding of her landlord. This was something else. Steady. Firm. 3 solid raps that carried authority. Jasmine froze. Her heart raced. For a terrifying moment, she thought it was the sheriff with eviction papers. Maybe Peterson had even called the police, spinning more lies. What if they took her away? What would happen to Marcus? She crept toward the door, her socks silent on the worn linoleum. Her hands shook as she slid the chain lock across and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. Standing in the dim hallway light was the elderly man from booth 12, the man whose wallet had destroyed her life. Fear stabbed through her chest. If he was here, maybe Peterson had pressed charges. Maybe he'd brought the police, waiting just out of sight. The image of being handcuffed in front of Marcus flashed through her mind. Her knees buckled. But she couldn't hide. With trembling fingers, she cracked the door open, the chain still fastened. Her voice came out thin and broken. "Can I help you?" The man's face was worn with age, but his eyes were kind, sad, even. "Miss Carter," he asked softly. "My name is Arthur Pendleton. I believe you found my wallet today." Jasmine flinched, panic rushing in. Words tumbled out in desperation. "I didn't steal it. I swear I didn't. I was about to give it to the manager, but he was on the phone. I only looked for ID, I would never take anything. Please, you have to believe me. I have a son." Arthur raised a hand, not to silence her, but to calm her. His voice was gentle, steady. "I know. I believe you. I saw the truth with my own eyes." The man she thought had come to condemn her, had actually come to save her. Jasmine blinked in shock. "You, what? May I come in for a moment?" Arthur asked kindly. "I promise you, I'm not here to cause trouble. I came to undo some of the trouble that's already been done to you." Her instinct screamed to shut the door. But his eyes held no malice, only quiet sincerity. Against every ounce of fear, she slid the chain free and opened the door. Arthur stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the cracked floor. His coat was simple but expensive, his presence filling the tiny space. He glanced around the apartment, taking in the crayons taped to the wall, the single pair of Marcus's worn sneakers by the door, the stack of bills on the table. He didn't look judgmental. He looked heartbroken. "I went back to the diner," Arthur began, turning to face her. "I asked to see the security footage. I saw everything." Jasmine's stomach dropped, but Arthur continued. "I saw you find the wallet. I saw you look toward Peterson's office, saw he was busy. I watched you serve customers, even kneel down to help a child who dropped a crayon. And when you went into the break room, I saw the look on your face when you came out. That wasn't the look of a thief. That was the look of someone who had made a difficult choice. And then you tried to go to him. But he never let you speak." Jasmine's throat tightened. No one had ever defended her before, not like this. "What Peterson did to you," Arthur said, his voice firm, was cruel. It was an injustice. And it was done in my name. Because Starlight Hospitality is my company. I started it with my wife. Jasmine staggered back, nearly collapsing onto the sofa. You own it? Arthur nodded slowly. Yes. And Peterson no longer works for me. But firing him isn't enough. It doesn't erase what happened to you. It doesn't pay your rent. And it doesn't help your son. Jasmine's eyes burned with tears. She could only nod, unable to form words. Arthur's voice softened, almost paternal. In this world, honesty is rare. Today you were tempted with something that could have solved your problems instantly. But you chose integrity. You protected the memory of a stranger. That choice tells me everything about who you are. He reached into his coat and pulled out a long white envelope. This is not charity. This is restitution. And an offer. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a cashier's check. When she saw the number, her vision blurred. $50,000. Her knees went weak. That will cover your debts, Arthur explained gently. Your rent, your son's medical bills, a cushion so you never again have to consider a choice like the one you face today. And it compensates you for the humiliation you endured. Jasmine covered her mouth, tears streaming freely. But Arthur wasn't done. Inside the envelope was also a letter. Heavy cream paper, embossed with the Starlight Hospitality logo. She scanned it in disbelief. It was a job offer, regional manager of quality and training, with a salary she had never dreamed of. Full benefits for her and Marcus. Effective immediately. Arthur's eyes met hers. My company has grown too big. Too cold. I need someone to help me restore the values it was built on, decency, humanity. Someone who has lived the other side of it. Someone with character that can't be questioned. I need you. The woman thrown out as a thief was now being asked to rebuild an empire. Arthur reached into his wallet and carefully pulled out the faded photo of Genevieve. He held it as if it were fragile glass. This is my wife. She always said, you can judge a person's soul by what they do when no one's watching. Today, I saw your soul, Jasmine. And it reminded me of hers. He placed the photo back with care, then looked at her with quiet pleading. Please. Help me make this company what she dreamed it could be again. Jasmine stared at the check, the job offer, and the man who had gone from stranger to savior in the span of an hour. The crushing weight that had suffocated her for years lifted. She thought of Marcus, of doctors, stability, a safe home. She thought of finally being seen, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as someone of worth. A sob broke through her chest, followed by a disbelieving laugh. She looked at Arthur through tears and, for the first time in years, smiled from her soul. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I accept. Jasmine's story was no longer one of defeat. It had become a story of justice, and rebirth. The next morning, Jasmine woke up before sunrise, but this time, it wasn't to drag herself into another grueling diner shift. She stood in front of the cracked mirror above her dresser, smoothing down her hair with hands that trembled, not from exhaustion, but from disbelief. The neatly pressed blazer Arthur had sent over hung on her shoulders like it belonged there. For the first time in years, she didn't look like a woman beaten down by the world. She looked like a woman stepping into her future. Marcus peeked from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. Mommy, you look like a boss. Jasmine laughed, scooping him up. That's because today, baby, I am one. Arthur had arranged everything. A car waited downstairs to take her to Starlight Hospitality's headquarters. As the city blurred by outside the window, Jasmine pressed her forehead against the glass. She had walked the same streets yesterday drowning in despair. Now she was heading toward a chance to rewrite her life. At the headquarters, Arthur was waiting in the lobby. No boardroom airs, no bodyguards, just him, standing tall with his cane. "Welcome, Miss Carter," he said warmly. "Shall we?" The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Jasmine stepped into a gleaming boardroom filled with executives in suits. Their faces showed a mix of confusion and thinly veiled disdain. They didn't know who she was, only that she didn't look like them. Arthur cleared his throat. "This is Jasmine Carter, our new regional manager of quality and training. She will be working directly with me to evaluate and reform our operations." A murmur rippled through the room. One man, gray-haired and stiff, spoke up. "With respect, sir, she doesn't have the qualifications." Arthur's eyes turned icy. "She has the one qualification that matters, integrity. Something that seems to be in short supply in this company." The room went silent. They doubted her. But soon, they'd see the fire she carried. Jasmine spent the following weeks visiting diners across the city. At first, employees looked at her with suspicion. Who was this newcomer? Another corporate watchdog? But Jasmine didn't stand behind a clipboard. She rolled up her sleeves. She poured coffee, cleared tables, and listened. She heard about managers like Peterson, petty tyrants who used policy to crush workers. She heard about staff pulling double shifts without breaks, about cut corners that put people at risk. And she wrote everything down. Not in cold reports, but in detailed notes Arthur read with care. One afternoon, in a crowded Bronx diner, Jasmine saw a young black waitress being scolded harshly by her manager for giving a child an extra napkin. The girl's face burned with the same humiliation Jasmine had once felt. Without hesitation, Jasmine stepped in. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "I'm here to observe. And I just observed a manager discouraging kindness. That ends today." The staff looked at her differently after that. Word began to spread, Jasmine Carter wasn't here to punish workers. She was here to protect them. Back at headquarters, Arthur watched the reports roll in. "You've done in weeks what others haven't in years," he told her. Jasmine shook her head. "I just listened to people. Something your managers forgot to do." Arthur smiled softly. "Which is why I chose you." The waitress they threw out was becoming the voice of every worker who had ever been silenced. But success didn't come without enemies. Some executives whispered behind closed doors, unhappy with Arthur's choice. They wanted someone polished, someone qualified. They couldn't stand that a black mother from a diner was sitting at the same table. One day, during a quarterly review, one of them challenged her openly. "Ms. Carter, you may have good intentions, but running a chain requires more than sympathy. Do you even understand profit margins?" Jasmine's back straightened. She had spent her life stretching every dollar, calculating bills, cutting corners just to survive. Profit margins? She lived them. "I understand that when workers are treated with dignity, turnover drops. Training costs drop. Customer satisfaction rises. And do you know what that means?" She leaned forward, her voice steady. "Higher profits. Integrity isn't bad for business, it's the foundation of it. The room fell silent. Even Arthur's lips curved into a proud smile. They thought they could break her with doubt. Instead, she broke their arguments with truth. As months passed, Jasmine's influence grew. Policies changed. Workers were given fairer schedules, better healthcare options, and more say in decisions. Managers like Peterson were weeded out, replaced with people who understood that kindness wasn't a weakness, it was strength. One evening, Jasmine returned home to find Marcus working on his homework. He looked up and grinned. "Mommy, you're always busy now. But you look happy." She hugged him tight. "That's because we're building something better, baby. Not just for us, for everyone." She thought back to the diner, to the humiliation, the shame. That day had nearly broken her. But now, she saw it clearly, it had also made her. The woman who once begged for her job was now creating jobs. The woman they shamed was now shaping a legacy. And she wasn't done yet. Months passed, and the name Jasmine Carter became known across Starlight Hospitality. Workers whispered it with respect. Customers noticed changes. Diners that once felt cold and lifeless began to carry a warmth they hadn't felt in years. But not everyone was happy. Some executives continued to resist, holding on to their old ways. They grumbled about costs, about soft policies. They wanted the company to remain profit first, people second. Arthur wasn't blind to their whispers. He knew a showdown was coming. And Jasmine, once just a waitress, was about to stand at the center of it. The annual shareholders meeting arrived, held in a grand hall buzzing with investors, executives, and reporters. For Jasmine, walking onto that stage felt surreal. Just months earlier, she had been humiliated in front of strangers at a diner. Now, she stood before hundreds, ready to tell her story. Arthur introduced her. This company was built on human decency. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. Today, I want you to hear from the person reminding us what truly matters. Jasmine stepped to the podium. The room went silent. She took a breath, steadying her voice. "I am not an executive. I wasn't hired from a boardroom. I was a waitress, a black mother working double shifts to keep the lights on. One day, I found a wallet with $5,000 inside. That money could have saved me from eviction. It could have bought medicine for my son. But I didn't keep it. I chose honesty. For that, I was called a thief, fired, and shamed in front of a crowd." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters' pens flew across notepads. But the truth came out. And because of that, I'm standing here today. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted a handout. But because integrity matters. Workers matter. People matter. When you forget that, you lose more than profits, you lose your soul. The waitress they tried to silence was now the voice that no one could ignore. She continued, her voice growing stronger. "I've seen managers abuse workers for giving a child an extra napkin. I've seen parents humiliated for being poor. That stops here. We are building a company where decency isn't punished, it's rewarded. And if that scares you, then you're the problem." The room erupted in murmurs. Some investors nodded with approval. Others shifted uncomfortably. But no one could deny the truth of her words. Arthur stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "This is the future of Starlight Hospitality. Integrity. Compassion. Strength. And this woman, Jasmine Carter, is leading that future." The applause began small but grew until the entire hall thundered. From that moment, everything changed. Articles appeared in newspapers, from fired waitress to corporate leader, Jasmine Carter's rise. TV stations told her story. For many across the country, she became a symbol, proof that doing the right thing still mattered, even in a world that often rewarded the opposite. The woman who had once been humiliated in silence was now celebrated nationwide. At home, Marcus watched the news with wide eyes. "Mommy, that's you. You're famous." Jasmine laughed, pulling him into her arms. "No, baby. I'm not famous. I'm just someone who didn't give up." But in her heart, she knew this was bigger than her. She wasn't just rewriting her own story, she was opening doors for others. Workers who had once been invisible now had a champion. Customers who once felt ignored now felt seen. One evening, after a long day, Arthur invited her to visit the very first diner he and Genevieve had opened decades earlier. It was closed now, preserved like a memory. They sat in a booth together, the walls lined with old photographs. Arthur pulled out Genevieve's picture again, his hands trembling slightly. "She would have been proud of you," he whispered. Jasmine swallowed the lump in her throat. "No, Mr. Pendleton. She'd be proud of you, for not forgetting what you started." Arthur smiled faintly. "I almost did. But you reminded me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of legacy heavy in the air. For Jasmine, it wasn't just about saving her own life anymore. It was about honoring every worker who had ever been disrespected. It was about teaching her son that honesty and strength would always matter. Her story had started with a wallet. But it ended with something money could never buy: respect, justice, and hope. Weeks later, Jasmine returned to the Golden Spoon Diner, the very place where Peterson had destroyed her. Only this time, she walked in not as an employee, but as a regional manager. The same staff who had once watched her humiliation now rose to their feet, clapping. Brenda rushed forward, tears in her eyes, pulling Jasmine into a hug. "You did it, girl," Brenda whispered. "You did it for all of us." Jasmine smiled, looking around at the faces of workers who finally had reason to hope. "No," she said softly. "We did it together." And with that, the cycle was broken. The woman they called a thief had become the builder of a new legacy. Jasmine Carter's story reminds us that the choices we make when no one is watching define us more than anything else. In her darkest hour, she chose honesty, and though the world tried to crush her for it, her integrity carried her to a place she never imagined. This isn't just the story of a black waitress and a billionaire. It's the story of resilience, of black excellence, of what happens when an underdog refuses to be silenced. It's proof that integrity can turn humiliation into triumph, and despair into destiny. So let this be a reminder to all of us: do the right thing, even when it costs you. Because somewhere, someone is watching. And sometimes, that choice can change your entire life. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice, resilience, and black excellence. Thank you for watching.